She's an executive coach for neurodivergent talent. Welcome, Kate.
Sounds like me wearing many different hats.
Very appropriately, you've got one of your hats. You're fascinating. You're interesting.
Just an absolute curiosity around how we express ourselves.
Yes, and that was something I learned. It was the first time I'd heard that word. It was something I learned that evening.
It's a simple process of closing your eyes and just imagining a horse.
I observed your eye movements, and I said, well, Kate, what's happening when your eyes are moving like that? I'm wondering if you'd like to read a piece of your poetry.
You are the horse running, muscles rippling. I am the thudding of hooves on well-trod turf.
Hello listeners, we are your co-hosts Janine Bailey and Marie Quigley for the Empower World Coaching and Leadership Podcast. Empower World brings guests who are making a difference to the world to inspire coaches and leaders who lead with mind, heart and soul.
Hello and welcome listeners. It's great to be back after a lovely long summer break. My name's Marie Quigley. And I'm not with my lovely business partner today. She's somewhere in the UK. I know she's moved here. So we've got exciting news about Janine being back here that we'll share when we're on a podcast together. And today I've got a wonderful guest that I'm really looking forward to her sharing her thoughts, her experiences, and her research with us. And I've got the wonderful Dr. Kate Jenkinson, research scientist, experienced HR professional, and a public spoken word poet. And her work is really phenomenal. And also, as well as that, she's an executive coach for neurodivergent talent. Welcome, Kate.
Thank you, Marie. What an introduction. That sounds like me wearing many different hats as usual. Thank you.
Very appropriately, you've got one of your hats on today. And actually, that's how I met you, in a hat in the summer, in July.
Yes, it was. It was rather a warm day from what I remember as well. But the hat's important.
Yeah, and we'll go on. We'll get into why the hat's important. Listeners, I met Kate at the Sheffield Coaching Exchange in-person event, Gather and Grow. It was an amazing event, the first event in Sheffield for coaches, and I was one of the speakers, and I opened the session, and Kate closed the session with a magnificent spoken word experience of the whole day, and also an invitation for us as coaches, as people, participants in the room, to write our own spoken word poetry. So it was a beautiful experience. That was my first meeting with you, Kate.
Yeah, well, that was where we all met. I think from the Sheffield Coaching Exchange first time, I think they'd had the conference and face-to-face, and it was a brilliant event. I think lots of people had a fantastic experience of that day. So, yeah, it was an honour to close it, to be honest.
Yeah, and thanks to Julie and Chloe and Alex once again. I'm not even sure if I've acknowledged them in the podcast since then for arranging such a fantastic event.
Yeah, it was wonderful.
And then the second time we met, Kate, was in person at the Sheffield University. You did a wonderful event on aphantasia. Hope I've got that right.
Yeah. That's right. Well, that's how I say it anyway. Now, some people say aphantasia, so you can say it either way.
Okay. Aphantastic is how you described it as well. And you had a fun...
Well, this is it.
Yeah, it's on that night.
I like my T-shirts as well as my hats. Yeah.
And so I just thought, you're fascinating. You're interesting. You bring something different to the experience of coaching. You offer, as coaches, something different to think about when we're working with our clients. And I just thought, what a wonderful opportunity that you said yes to coming on and sharing with all of our listeners all around the world about what you do and what we should be thinking as coaches that might be out of our normal awareness.
Okay. Well, I'm honoured to be here, and I think I get the interesting observation that I bring something unique and different, but I'm just going to be me. So I'll just show up as I am, and hopefully that will be something that sparks different thoughts in others. So, being authentically myself and sharing how I experience the world, I think does provide a different perspective with the characteristics that you've mentioned, Marie. So, yeah, I'll honour that approach.
I appreciate that, Kate. Thank you. And so where should we begin? Should we begin with your beautiful spoken word poetry? I mean, you're doing a big conference. You're organising a conference right now for that. Where would you like? Yeah, it would be important to begin.
So where does Kate's story begin? I think the thing that unites everything that I do is this kind of thirst for knowledge and a curiosity and yearning for things to be authentic, and for connection to be something that is a priority for the human race. And I know it sounds big and grand when I say it like that, but I think it's also simple. It's also a simple kind of philosophy on life. And all the things that I think I've done somehow touch on that theme. So starting off as a research scientist, and it was in none of the subjects that I've since worked in. So I was a biologist that came from a thirst of knowledge of where did we come from? How did we evolve? Fundamental questions like that, Marie. And just an absolute curiosity around how we express ourselves, because I was that child growing up that the way I seemed to show up resonated either exceptionally well with people or was the antithesis of how they expected a child to learn or show up. So I used to describe myself when I was going through recruitment processes as Marmite. You'll either love me or hate me. That's the experience that I've had in my life so far. And I'm okay with that. I'd rather people were open and honest in their relationships and how they experience one another, because I think when you do that, you touch a truth for you and for the other person. So I was okay with that kind of take. So how does that fit in with poetry? I think poetry is the beauty and truth in the world around us, and that thought of it being a truth to somebody is really important to me. And truth and justice sensitivity are a neurodivergent perspective as well. So my brain, although it's blank, although there's nothing in there in terms of visuals, it's almost like a Venn diagram. It's a mass Venn diagram of, well, how does that overlap with that? So where does beauty and truth show up in the world? It shows up in science, it shows up in business, it shows up in art. It's everywhere if you look for it. So I guess that's why I'm a scientist and a poet. So the beauty and the truth, the things that it distills down to.
I so appreciate that. And I'm also struck by how your interest in biology, you described it as an evolution. And that's to me what coaching is. It's an evolution of growth and connection, and that truth and authenticity and beauty, and how that is linked to our purpose and what really kind of makes us do what we do.
Yeah, and there's the thing I love about science, is that it is a truth. It uncovers truths. It discovers. There's a detective element. I am really excited by the what we can explore and discover, and how we can uncover these truths. And I think science does that, and poetry does that. And then business has a choice. Business has a choice to either exploit that or rejoice in it. And I think that the businesses and organisations that choose to rejoice around the beauty and the truth of being human, of being, imperfect, of being an organic being, as opposed to, we're emotionally intelligent, not artificially intelligent. That's how I'm saying things at the moment. What does that mean? How does it show up? Yeah, that's kind of what matters to me.
I very much appreciate and resonate with that. And Kate, you said when you were describing your journey from becoming a scientist to a poet, and you talked about how your mind is blank. And that relates to that word that we talked about at the beginning, which is aphantasia.
Yeah. So aphantasia is the inability to make voluntary images in the mind's eye. So when I close my eyes, it's black. I can't draw any images into my mind at all. It doesn't mean I can't. For me, and people experience aphantasia in different senses, but for me, when I dream, I do see images, but they're not voluntary; they're involuntary. So I can hallucinate if that was, something that happened to me. I think after I'd had morphine once, when I'd, experienced, I can make images, but they're not voluntary. They're not ones I choose to make. And not when I'm alert or awake. So for me, that has always been the case. And it's about the same for, they say 3 to 5% of the population have no mental imagery, so cannot visualize anything in their mind's eye. And to me, that was a real surprise. And I think anyone who discovers that they're aphantasic, it's not something that you learn about in any normal or natural or education setting. You kind of come across it through social media, or, maybe like we did at the Sheffield Coaching Exchange, I was asked to present on it. So it's starting to be something that's getting into the right places. But it's really important that people understand that the imagination spectrum is very different for everybody. So yes, I'm one of the 3 or 5%, depending on how many of us have no mental imagery. Yeah.
Yes, and that was something I learned. It was the first time I'd heard that word. It was something I learned that evening, and you brought up, I think it was 6 images with varying degrees of blankness to clarity to that of blurredness. And you asked us to imagine something. Maybe we could do that now, actually, for our listeners. I know they're not seeing you, but would you be willing to kind of ask some questions so that they can also experience what I experience, Kate?
Of course. And I always caveat this, Marie, is that it can actually cause a level of anxiety and stress to realise that you maybe are aphantasic and you hadn't appreciated that people can make images in their mind's eye. So if you do this exercise and you discover that you are aphantasic or think you might be, just be aware that there could be some, response to that is important to recognise and process in yourself. It's a simple process of closing your eyes and just imagining a horse. And the horse that you're imagining, thinking about the details of it. So what colour is the horse? Is the horse stationary or is it moving? Where is the horse? Is it in an environment that you're familiar with? Is it on the beach? Is it in a field? Is it alone? Are there other horses there, other animals? And when you're looking at the image that you've created in your mind's eye, how clear is it? Is it moving? Is it something that looks like a film, perhaps, where there's movement and you can bring other images into it? Or is it quite static? 2D, or if you're like me, there are no images at all. So that's kind of like the process when you open your eyes. Then I get people to look at a very basic image of a horse, which you might mark on a scale of 1 to 6, from aphantasic, making no images in your mind's eye, to if you can make movie-like images, so like it's a film, then that would be hyperphantasic. And equally at the extremes of the imagination spectrum, those are unusual mental imagery. So hyperphantasic is as uncommon as aphantasic. So at those very extremes. And then people have a range of experiences in between.
And
so that's what we do.
It's so surprising, Kate, because I'm at the other end of the extreme. So I'm hyperphantasic. I can put whatever I want in my mind, create an image. I can smell it. I can taste it. I can move into it and stroke that horse and bring so many different things in on what's interesting.
Yeah.
That's also an unusual ability. But
it is.
For years, I'm assuming everybody can do that.
Yes. And I think that's the thing, is that when you are, and my experience of the working world is that we will ask people to have a vision as a leader, or to visualize success, or we'll rely heavily on this ability, this imagination that some people don't have.
Yeah.
So some people, like you said, you brought in other senses. So aphantasia can cover sight, sound, hearing, touch, and taste. So as you've said, you can bring all of those in. There are people who can bring none of those in. And actually, I'm still exploring that for myself. I don't know if I can touch, taste, hear. I think maybe I can hear. I think that is my sense that I do have. But I'm not sure about the others, because I'm not very good at cooking. I'm not very good at anticipating what will look good. I have to really get hands-on and make things happen in front of my eyes. And I think that's the amazing thing, is that people think I'm visual because I like to see images and I like to appreciate art, but it's because there's nothing internally. So I love the external manifestation of all of that. Yeah. So, yeah.
And for me, why I wanted to talk to you, because I think it's so important as coach training providers, if you're listening to this, or coaches, if you're listening to it, and you've been taught the visualization process or what success is using all of those senses. And your client may not get that if you do, or you as a coach may not have noticed or may not have spoken up and said, actually, I don't see anything. So it was just about more normalizing this a little bit, but also being conscious in our work as coaches to get curious. We talk about never assuming anything, but don't assume anymore that your client is able to see, smell, taste, hear, whatever it is.
Exactly.
It's about finding out, using perhaps clean language, so that the client can share their own experience in whatever way they want.
The thing is, Marie, if you'd have asked me if I could visualize, I'd have probably said yes, not knowing what that actually meant. So I think the research is relatively new in this area. And one of the pieces of research was, how can people have aphantasia but not know it? And it's partly because we're not having conversations like this. But it's also because a lot of us think that everyone else is doing what we do, which is making metaphors. So when I write poetry, I use metaphor. I don't use imagery. In my mind, I can't see the thing. But what I'm probably very practiced and good at doing is likening something to something else. And that metaphor is what is my imagery. So I am very empathic and very in tune with my emotions. And so I turn my emotions into metaphors. And I love doing that. because I don't have the mental imagery. And so that's what people are experiencing when I write my poetry or communicate. But that's what I thought everybody else was doing when they were talking about counting sheep. I mean, it's just a metaphor, isn't it? They can't actually see sheep in their mind. And then it's like, oh no, but they can they? Really? So all of those realizations you get, and there are still moments now when I'm taken by surprise in the communities that I'm now in, that are sort of people who've learnt their aphantasic, and they share kind of their insights all the time. So I'm still learning about, I'm not going to call it a condition, I'm still learning about the difference in my imagination spectrum. Oh yeah.
I also remember when we were talking at the event, Kate, and we were we were just doing a little bit of one-to-one exploring I was curious about what it was like for you, and I observed your eye movements, and I said, well, Kate, what's happening when your eyes are moving like that? And you said,
yeah,
just checking inside to see if I've got any emotions about that. And I think that also is important for coaches, because often we're taught, oh, eye movement means they're seeing something in the past or present, and no, it doesn't.
No, it doesn't.
Let's not make up anything. Let's get curious.
That's really interesting, isn't it? Is that from NLP, Marie, or is that from another? Yeah. And no, it's emotional. It's the emotional, where am I feeling that? And then, honestly, we find it really hard as aphantasics to explain to those who visualize what is happening, because we don't actually understand it ourselves. I can just tell it definitely is an instinct. It's definitely I'm checking in with a range of things, emotions, experiences, what I've noticed. It's much more of a kinesthetic experience without the visualization. So it's like pulling all of that information together, that kind of lived wisdom, and going, here's a response. And I know I can be slow in responding to questions because I have to do that kind of mining for information that takes probably a lot longer. Just reflecting on that actually now takes a lot longer maybe than other people's processes for, checking in on themselves. I can't body scan. I just want to say that when people say body scan or kind of, I get lost. I can't visualize my body, so I can't scan it in my head. So those sorts of phrases don't work for me, don't work. She says it in yoga, and I lie there getting very bored and getting distracted, which is not what you want to set up. That's not the thinking that you want to set up when you say, have an image of your body or have an image of yourself, or, it gets a different response.
Yeah, I'm curious, Kate, now, when you tap into the body in a somatic experience or an emotional response.
Yeah.
And somebody said to you, what color is that emotion? What happens then?
It's got no color. So it's got no colour, but do colours have meanings to me? Yes, colours do have meanings, but they will be... So we're described as conceptualisers. So we're not visualisers, we're conceptualisers. So for me to make a meaning of what colour is that, I'd probably have to think about... the colours that spark an emotion and what kind of emotion they spark in me. So I'd make a connection with the emotions between one thing and another, and that would take some time, as you can imagine. So that's what would happen. I'd tune into what the emotional response was for both of those two things. It's quite a scientific way as well, isn't it? It's quite literal and logical, but there would be an answer. But given that you've not given me the scenario, I don't know what it would be right now. I don't have a range of ready-made responses to that.
I appreciate you sharing that. And I also recall at the event, you showed us some artwork that you did because you wanted to help us understand that although you might not see something inside your head, this conceptualization that you create is very much part of your creativity.
Yeah, so it's really ironic because the language sounds like I'm making, when they say about a bigger picture thinker, I am a bigger picture thinker without the picture. So what that means is the dots that I join up may not be the dots that everybody else has join up, because what I will be doing is doing something around the emotional response. So it will be in a situation, I'm trying to think of an example here now, but when I used to do organisational change in my role as an HR leader, I would try and think of the range of emotional responses an organisational change would have. And then I would think how we could, what things would eliminate or be cathartic, a bit like poetry is cathartic for emotions. I would try and think what would not eliminate it. What's the word? Kind of, there's a scientific word. Neutralize. What would neutralize that emotion so that it was something that everybody could be comfortable with? That's the way my brain would conceptualize how to manage something. I know you're talking about images. So the images are simplified to the basic elements. So if I were to be an artist, although I could replicate line for line something I'm seeing literally, if I had nothing but a blank piece of paper, it would be really basic in terms of what I put on that paper to represent an image. So the example I gave you in the training was a cup, and all I was able to replicate were the lip of the cup and the circles and the different sizes, but I joined them all together. And the person who was running that session said that's very unusual to create an image like that from the instruction you were given. That is a way that a conceptual artist would work. So that kind of resonated really strongly with me, thinking, well, that's how a conceptualizing brain works.
Yeah, it's so fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And the curiosity around those differences is really important, I think, like you say, for coaches and people who are needing to convey learning and development, that kind of, role. We need to understand that everyone receives and processes information very differently.
And I think we have a concept of that. We kind of know that logically, but actually really being with somebody else who has a different way of understanding the world and themselves helps clarify that. There are lots of models about how we distort, delete, and generalize information to help our brains, put things together. But for me, because I'm a very practical learner, I get much more joy out of learning from somebody else who's perhaps very different to me.
Yeah. And there's great joy in that. In fact, this reminds me of one of my friends who is a poet who is hyperphantasic, like you are, Marie. And she and I would work together on our poetry to help each other edit what we were producing. So I used to say to her, are you just putting on paper what you see in your head? Because there's no meaning in this to me. You're just having fun with images. And she went, yeah, that's what I'm doing. And I went, well, it's not landing with me at all. And then I would kind of share my stuff with her and I'd go, does that work? And she said, well, it's not really sparking anything imagery-wise. You might want to use a different phrase or word, or you've got mixed images in that for me. Like, okay, so we would help each other edit our poetry to give a more rounded experience for somebody who is reading it off the page or hearing it at a performance, poetry performance. Yeah.
How beautiful to recognize that strengths within the two of you, and together you're stronger.
Yeah, it's nice. And I wrote a poem for her about that difference, and it's in my new book. And I'm delighted that she's actually going to be one of the feature poets at my book launch, because hopefully people will hear the difference in her poetry and mine, and it will give a different experience for people.
Well, you've mentioned the book, Kate. I didn't know about your new book, so talk about it, please. Tell us what it is and what's it all about.
Okay, so it's called Unbroken. And that's taken from the neurodiversity world, that many people feel broken because of the feedback they get about not being enough or being too much. So the title is Unbroken, as in a kintsugi vase is unbroken. And it's the fact that our flaws don't break us, they kind of make us, really. They make us who we are. And there's something beautiful in that, and there's something truthful in that. So again, being unbroken is a beautiful thing. And that's the title of my collection. It's my first poetry collection. It covers a number of topics: the workplace, friendship, motherhood, all sorts of things, neurodiversity. And it's coming out in October. So, yeah.
Congratulations. How wonderful.
Thank you. Yeah, it feels like it's been a few years in the making.
And you're also busy arranging a poetry event.
So this is where the circle of poetry and science and entrepreneurialism overlap. So the evidence suggests that poetry has the ability to inspire hope, and it can connect people across multiple differences. So poetry is a leveler of the human experience, and in business it can help us create a human-centered experience of people. Now, when I say stuff like that, people go, yeah, but how? It's not really practical, is it? That's very conceptual. And I'm going, yes, that's my conceptual brain going, that's enough for everyone in the world to go, we're on board, Kate, we'll join you on this mission. So the conference is a poetry and business conference, and it's to showcase the journey that I've been on the last 8 years exploring this. And it's so that people can understand that concept and how others have made that come alive. Through organisational development, through just living a poetic way of being and building a business in that way, or sharing poetry for well-being, so helping people process difficult things in their lives. So the Poetry and Business Conference is kind of like the manifestation of my conceptual brain putting all of these dots together and going, hey everyone, can't you see that this is a thing that could make the world a better place? So that's what it is. And it's probably the first of its kind, and hopefully I'll do it again, because I want to build a community of practice. So those people who already go, yes, Kate, we understand that poetry can make business a better place. Those are the people I want to draw together and say, okay, this is a thing. You're not just imagining something bizarre, or without evidence base, because there is evidence in science to say that poetry helps well-being, it helps leadership, it helps professional growth and personal growth. So it's turning that into something that is tangible. It's making it real for other people.
Yeah, fascinating. I mean, my hyperphantasic brain is going crazy at the moment with all masses of images that are flooding in as you describe that case. And it feels overwhelming as it's moving through me and my body as you're describing it. And it feels joyous as well. We've used that word before, but it feels joyous to me that you're doing this kind of work.
But I think poetry and creativity is the joy that we've squeezed out of enterprise by trying to make business efficient. And what we've forgotten is that if we make it so efficient, it's not joyful anymore. And, you know, human endeavor and enterprise is a joyful thing. So I want to bring that back into business, back into organizations, back into the workplace. So when we do that, when we design a deliberately joyful human experience, then a lot of the situations we've got in organizations today will resolve themselves because people will be happy to be there. That happiness will inspire others. That will create processes that work for people. I think the drudgery of organizations and the lack of meaning is something that poetry can really help with. So it's easy, it's the emotional connection I'm trying to bring back into the workplace. Because I love enterprise. You know, I've built my own business in the last 8 years to incorporate coaching, poetry, and, everything in between.
And I really appreciate that, the diversity of your business as well, because I think that's important. A lot of coaches think they need to fit in a box and be an executive coach who wears a suit or works with people who only wear a suit or put themselves in what do the marketers say? You've got to choose a niche and follow that niche. And I have a belief that actually we can be many things in this work. And the more open and flexible we are, the more interesting it is for us, but also for our clients. Brave enough to step outside of the box, to bring poetry into our work, to bring art, sounds, emotional responses into our work. I think it allows the human connection to self become much more profound.
Yeah, and, you know, people are encouraged to bring their whole self to work, which is ironic because then the neurodiversity folks bring their whole self to work. You go, oh, no, I didn't mean like that. It's like, do it, but in this way. So I think neurodiversity is why I've ended up with a niche. If you know, we're encouraged to have one, it is my niche, simply because by being authentically me, I have opened myself to being confident with my neurodiversity, with my neurodivergent way of being, and being authentic and being comfortable and courageous to talk about this, I think attracts others to do the same and gives them permission as well. And you can do it in a way that doesn't cause hardship or pain to others. You know, you can do it with emotional honesty and kindness. And that's what I try to bring into my coaching space. And I think you're right, you know, this thing about being who you are attracts those people who are interested in creating that same experience for others. So hopefully it's a ripple that will kind of grow, you know, through the conference and through different channels like the book that I've written and conversations like this. Yeah.
And when is the conference, just so that our listeners are aware?
So it's online and it's on the 14th of November. And if that date has passed, then what I'm hoping to do is have ripples after the conference. So a fringe festival of poetry and business, workshops, a post-conference anthology. So I think this is the beginning of something that's I have a real passion for. So I can't see it stopping at the conference. But that is a day to showcase poetry and business and what that means to me. And I would like to invite anyone to come along and make their own meaning of it, because it has a meaning.
Thanks, Kate. Hope you're open to that invitation, listeners, especially being online. People can join from all over the world, Kate.
Yeah, that's Kate, the plan.
Yeah. I'm wondering, we're coming up to starting to wrap up our conversation. I can't actually believe how quickly this has flown. I'm wondering if you like to read a piece of your poetry?
I'm going to go with something in the friendship space, because that's where I feel you and I have met each other and become friends almost. And it's the poem about my hyperphantasic friend and myself. So, though this is called Poetry Pen Pals, and it's after Your Like by Sylvia Plath. It was a prompt at a poetry writing workshop. You are the horse running, muscles rippling. I am the thudding of hooves on well-trod turf. Your movement, like gold dust in sunbeams. I am the wooden curtain rings sliding on the pole. You are the gently wafting curtain at the open window. I am the young boy's whistle in the street below. You are the milk van floating on the road. I am the rattle clink of empty cratered bottles. You are the vast beauty of the arched rainbow. I am the hushed breath of awe from weary workers. You are the kaleidoscope mirrors with colours shifting constantly. I am the crunch, crack, turn as the beads resist the twisting.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I mean, for me, I saw everything floating through my imagination, and I'm so grateful for you sharing your work. Yeah, it is phenomenal how you can create such beauty out of those words and your experiences, Kate. So thank you for sharing with us. If our listeners want to know more about you and where to find you, how can they do that?
So I should have said my business is called Next Step HR because I work with HR teams through creative executive coaching. So that's the name of my business.
And in the UK, correct, Kate?
I'm based in the UK, yes. And you can contact me through my business or on LinkedIn or on Instagram if you're on Instagram or Facebook. So yeah, I'm on all the social media because I love to scatter poetry all over the place.
Fantastic. So thank you, Kate. I really appreciate you giving up your time. It's the most precious gift we have, and it was a joy to speak with you today.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Listeners, if you've enjoyed this, please share, like, move it around your community. If you find it interesting and want to know more, you can always contact Kate. If you want to know more about what we do at Empower World, of course, you can visit our websites, our LinkedIn pages, and we're all over social media too. Thank you for listening. See you next time.
Thanks for listening. You can find out more about us on our website, www.empower-world.com, and on our social media networks, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Be empowered.